I think the general consensus of opinion in the studio is that whilst there were some great riffs in that, it went on a little bit longer than anyone remembered. It was Don't Get Even, Get Mad by Virus. I'm joined in the studio by Coke and Dave. Welcome to the studio, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. So, right, Virus are playing this Saturday in Streatham. Right, where? The
Rock Attic.
The Rock Attic in Streatham. Cool. So let's bring you up.
Which is 223 Streatham High Road.
Okay, yeah, is that a new venue, I think?
Fairly new, yeah. It's just sort of started
I know a couple of other bands that have played there. Right, now next Saturday, the 20th, you're playing at
the Rock Attic again.
The Rock Attic again.
Yep.
But in January, you're playing in Croydon.
Yep, at the Brief.
At the Brief, which is where?
George Street in Croydon.
Okay, now let's get all the addresses and stuff out of the way first, so people can find out about Virus at.
Well, the MySpace is www.myspace.com/Virus Thrash.
Virus Thrash. Okay, great stuff. All the details for the gigs coming up there. Now, before we get on to why the band are back together and stuff like that, I mean, just to bring listeners up to speed, because we have a lot of youngsters out there, pretty younger than you probably, Dave, as well, who's just out of nappies, has to be said. Virus were one of the leading UK thrash bands in the late 80s. Late 80s. They were led back then by the a gentleman called Henry Heston, who we may or may not mention a bit
the
later
infamous
on.
Henry Heston.
Coke joined after the first album and left after the third.
Correct.
There was a reformation of sorts, not involving you.
In America.
That all fell to pieces, I believe.
Yeah, because they couldn't get their visas into Britain.
Right. Coke's reignited the band within the last year?
Within the last year, yeah.
Okay. It would be fair to say, wouldn't it, that Virus were seen as being perhaps somewhat controversial back in the day.
We got called the bad boys of thrash metal, to be quite honest with you.
You did, but now, why?
Because our gigs usually ended up in massive brawls. Including one of our roadies actually opening up the skull of one of our fans.
Right. That was nice of him.
It was at the Clarendon. It was supporting suicidal tendencies, and we had a fantastic gig, and one of the guys tried to touch Henry's guitar, and Steve, our roadie, he took out his nightstick and whacked him across the head with it.
Right, very nice. Now, it has to be said that although, there was controversy seemed to follow the band, you played some quite high-profile gigs for UK. If you look at a lot of the UK thrash bands that were around, people like Zentrix, for example, and Acid Rain,
who were good friends of ours,
right? Things like that. You seem to get some quite, I mean, there was the Celtic Frost tour that we were talking about off mic. Suicidals, well, that's great at Clarendon. I mean,
yeah.
There was the ill-fated Christmas gig in Leeds with Megadeth,
which we don't talk about anymore.
Right. We might have a word about it in a bit, but things. Do you think that there was any envy there because of the fact that although there seemed to be a bit of a problem with the press, you seem to be able to achieve perhaps something that some of the bands who were around at the time they didn't?
It was just good promotion with good people. We had a good team behind us that helped us out a lot. Great merchandising people. We had the journalists for the Sounds at the time were really, really kind to us. Right. I suppose Metal Forces journalists. That was a magazine back in the 80s.
I know. I used to write for it.
Yeah, well, you'll know. They did us a good spread, and Kerrang at the time they gave us a good spread until an ill-fated night in the Kit Kat Club, but I won't go into that one. He knows who he is.
Not Chris Watts, perchance?
No, it's somebody else, right, who I will not mention.
Fair enough.
But well, we just had really, really good press for some reason. I think they kind of picked up us because we were so controversial.
Right.
Other bands were a bit too straight-laced and they didn't do too much. When we had a massive hotel smash with Creator, because we shared like rooms with Creator and the Celtic Frost.
Yeah, there was Creator on the Celtic Frost. Yeah,
and we like smashed up a hotel and like caused about £6,500–7,000 worth of damage, which we didn't pay, but Messrs Farmer and Shellcraft had to cough it out.
I mean, it has to be said though, that controversy, means people are going to take notice of you.
Exactly. And I think that's why people took notice of us, because we were so different from the rest. But we had like I suppose we had a kind of a niche thing where we did the thermonuclear thing when nobody else was really doing it at the time.
Right.
We had sort of a style, and the way we dressed was kind of different to everybody else, because we used to dress with combats on all the time. There were camouflage combats, not just like straight combats, and we gave it that thermonuclear, post-nuclear metal syndrome, if you want.
Right.
And everybody sort of picked up on it and thought, well, this is different,
And I'm looking at a municipal waste poster right behind you, which kind of like,
seems to be bringing it all back.
20 years down the line, he's echoing that whole kind of thing.
Yeah, which is brilliant. I mean, I think it's fantastic.
So, now, you joined after the first album.
That's correct.
Okay. I mean, what did you know about Virus before you joined them?
Well, I knew the guys before because I used to hang about the 100 Club.
Right.
And these guys frequented the 100 Club. Tez and Henry used to frequent the 100 Club every week.
Right.
And go to see punk bands. And they originally played in a punk band called Criminal Damage, who I'd heard of and I knew. And I actually met them in the 100 Club, and they'd actually been back to where I was squatting at the time. They'd come back to my squat in Kennington, and they'd discuss things. They saw me playing guitar, and they realised that I wasn't just a punk guitarist.
Right.
So they gave me the chance to come down to Eastbourne and try out for them. I must say, we were based in Brighton, but the majority of Virus lived in Eastbourne.
And yet you seem to be known as a London band, I think, basically, because certainly Henry had such a, was always around.
Well, he had a rapport with a lot of the press and a lot of the kids in London. He used to come up frequently up to London to do interviews and stuff.
Now, you mentioned the punk thing. I think that's quite interesting because when people look back on thrash, I suppose almost through rose-tinted spectacles, they always talk about the punk element and the hardcore element. At the time, it wasn't very apparent in a lot of bands, but it always was very apparent. Virus had that sort of... it was thrash-stroke-punk almost.
Yeah, we got roasted a lot by the press because of our punk roots, which wasn't really fair because, I mean, you had bands like Discharge who were trying to go over into the metal thing. You had DRI, who were originally a punk band, hardcore band from America, and they were pushing over into the thrash scene as well.
I mean, that spurred the whole crossover scene, though, didn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Well, you could call us crossover. We were definitely crossover because we were tagged with that brush, really, because a lot of guys, I've got a lot of friends of mine who listen to punk, who were influenced by punk, and we were heavily influenced by punk. We were heavily influenced by Discharge in the early days.
Right.
And but I gave a metal edge to the band because I was listening to a lot more than just punk. When there was a lot of metal influences there, I was listening to Venom, I was listening to Iron Maiden, I was listening to AC/DC.
Well, just in that track we heard, I've forgotten that the riffs are really solid and very metal based, and yet it's got that kind of hardcore punk thing over the top of it as well.